Hello, hello. Oh, we're here. Good morning again, everybody. Let's bow our heads for prayer, shall we? Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for everyone who's here and who committed to work on this track. Pray that you please bless us this morning here together and help us to learn a few things, and may your Spirit touch us. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. I see a number of familiar faces. Those who don't know me, my name is Rick Pummel. My wife Estee will be back here in a minute to help me out. And we run the teen extreme events for the conference. So the rock climbing, mountain biking, caving, swiftwater canoeing, all that stuff. So today we want to talk about creativity and resource development, or I like to call it effective teaching. So in order to teach effectively, you need to know a little bit about the mechanics of learning. If you know something about how something works, generally you're going to be a little more effective at making it work right. Anyhow, I'm a tech guy, by the way, in my professional life, so I think in pieces and parts of things. We're also going to talk about a little bit about developing teaching resources, a little bit about successful worships, and a little bit about creativity with the AY honors. Now, do we have adventure people in here? Yep, okay. So you guys have the adventure awards, so same thing. All right, so learning styles. So we've got the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. Oh my goodness, what are we talking about? So it's easy enough to know the visual, right? You know, you can see things. The auditory, right? You can hear things. Kinesthetic, anybody, what's that? Touch, or doing something. Yep, hands-on thing. How many people like hands-on stuff? Yeah, lots of us. So, learning style inventory. We're going to do something here. I hope most of you have something to write with, or maybe a phone where you can type something in. Anything where you can record something, pull it out, and I have something for you to look at. See if I can get this over on the other screen. Up. Get big, please. There we go. And see, I cannot touch that screen, so I have to make it smaller here. Oh, that's fine. Go away. Get smaller. There we go. And scroll bar. I'm so used to touch screens. Okay, so do you guys have something where you can type something in or write it down? Can you see this okay? Should I make it a little bigger? There we go. All right, so there's 11 questions for each one of these. This is for your own personal inventory. We're going to have to do this kind of quickly in order to get through all the stuff in the class. But let's go through these, and I want you to mark a number. I guess I should go up a little bit so you can see here how we do it. All right, so often and sometimes and seldom or never. See that? So when you look at one of the questions, if you do this often, you write a 3 down. So you're going to make, there's going to be 3 sections. There's going to be visual. There's going to be 11 questions in the visual. So I want you just to write a number down. You don't need to write the question down. Just write a number for your score, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 for each question. And then you're going to tally up the total of those 11 questions. All right? So let's go through it real quick. I'll just read them off. I know you're capable of reading them, but so I remember information better if I write it down. 1, 2, or 3. Just your initial impression. Don't think about it too hard. Your initial impression is probably going to be the most accurate. Looking at the person helps me keep focused. 1, 2, or 3. Often, sometimes, or never. I need a quiet place to get my work done. Often, sometimes, or never. When I take a test, I can see the textbook page in my head, remembering back to studying it. That's if you studied it, right? I need to write down directions, not just take them verbally. Hopefully that's not too much of a problem for you right now, because I've told you the directions, right? Music or background noise distracts my attention from the task at hand. Like maybe you must be in a quiet place. I don't always get the meaning of a joke. I doodle and draw pictures on the margins of my notebook pages. I have trouble following lectures. That's a 3. I react very strongly to colors. Just they have maybe an impact or a feeling on you. All right, so tally those up. Maybe there's only 10. I was thinking total was, I was counting that as 11, so I think there's 10. So tally those numbers up. Hopefully your math skills are there, 1, 2s, and 3s. Shouldn't be too hard. Raise your hand when you got them tallied. All right, I'm going to move on down here. Hopefully I can move up a little bit too. All right, auditory.
So the first one was visual.
First one was visual, so you could once you get your total for that last one, write visual next to your total. Okay, so that's your visual score. Auditory, ready? We're going to do 1, 2s, and 3s again. Okay.
Where 1 is never.
Yeah, 1 is never, 2 was what? Sometimes, and 3 was like all the time, basically. All right, my papers and notebooks always seem messy. Not me, one. When I read, I need to use my index finger to track my place on the line. I do not follow written directions well. If I hear something, I will remember it. Writing has always been difficult for me. And I think that's not the mechanics of it. I think it's the just the process. I often misread words from the text. In other words, them instead of then. I would rather listen and learn than read and learn. You getting good at this now? Quick reaction, boom, boom, shoot from the hip. I would rather listen, I already read that, sorry. I'm not very good at interpreting an individual's body language. Pages with small print or poor quality copies are difficult for me to read. Yeah, I don't think we're talking about that you need glasses. I think it's...
Like, you have to do a lot of reading, and so when you read something, you're kind of like, I don't want to read that anymore.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Maybe, you have to really look at it hard to kind of, yeah. My eyes tire quickly, even though my vision checkup is always fine. All right, total them up. Is this working okay for you guys so far?
If you could read the questions twice, that would be
Oh yeah, okay. Kind of like PBE, right? All right, scores. Hands up if you've got yours tallied. We're looking around 95% here. Okay, I'm going to move on. By the way, I was always like the last 1% to finish my everything, so don't feel bad if you're one of those. All right, so here we go. Kinesthetic / tactile modality, so the touching, doing thing. And I will read them twice. I start a project before reading the directions. Again, I start a project before reading the directions.
One of the questions, it should say, instead of saying exercise back, it should just say, I like to do that while exercising. Because some of us like to walk and do that, so.
Yeah, that's true. And I've heard, well, I'll refrain from interpreting any of this stuff right now. I hate to sit at a desk for long periods of time. I hate to sit at a desk for long periods of time. I heard a hear, that's me. I have a sit-stand desk. I'm like standing almost all day long. I prefer to first see something done and then do it myself. Again, I prefer to first see something done and then to do it myself. I use the trial and error approach to problem solving. And again, I use the trial and error approach to problem solving. I guess I wanted to say method. But I like to read my textbook while riding an exercise bike. Yeah, you were ahead of us, weren't you?
Yes.
I like to read my textbook while riding an exercise bike. I take frequent study breaks. And again, I take frequent study breaks. I have a difficult time giving step-by-step instructions. Again, I have a difficult time giving step-by-step instructions, like how to go get someplace, trying to tell someone where to go around town, perhaps. I enjoy sports and do well at several different types of sports. Again, I enjoy sports and do well at several different types of sports. I use my hands when describing things. And again, I use my hands when describing things. I have to rewrite or type my class notes to reinforce the material. And again, I have to rewrite or type my class notes to reinforce the material. Go ahead and add your scores up. We don't have any runners here or anything, like PBE.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, boy, it really gets a lot smaller. Can you still, yeah, you can still see it, right? Not too bad. How are we doing for tallying scores? Most people haven't? Okay. All right. So we can read it here together, but the total score for each section. Now, a score of 21 points or more in a modality indicates a strength in that area. So any of you have a score that's like significantly higher than the others?
No.
Significantly, like by 4 points?
Sure. I have more like six or seven. Yeah?
I have two that are the exact same and they're the highest. The other one's
Okay.
not.
So is most people kind of pretty close to each other? Most people have everybody has a blend of these to some degree. So the highest of the three scores indicates the most efficient method of information intake. You know, how you process things, how you learn things. The second highest score indicates the modality which boosts the primary strength. In other words, if you have that method in addition to the first one, then it enhances your ability to learn and retain it. For example, a score of 23, I guess it goes on. In visual modality indicates a strong visual learner. Such a learner benefits from the text, from film strips, yada, yada. We'll go on and get into that here in the actual presentation. So, the visual learner. Let's talk about, any of you come out as being probably a little more of a visual learner or more? Okay, so we have a few who are claiming to be visual learners. All right, so here's some attributes of that. You observe rather than talk or act. You like to read. You're kind of more quiet by nature. The mind strays during verbal activities, and verbal instructions are difficult. Maybe you failed miserably on this thing we just did, right? Because I'm signing up here trying to tell you how to do it. Not too distractible, pretty organized. Memorizes through graphics and pictures. Remembers faces and notices details. Now, if this is not you, I want you to think about people you know who have these same attributes, okay? Maybe kids in your club that you've worked with. Meticulous, neat, and quiet. So those of you who scored high on the visual side, does that sound kind of mostly like you?
Half of it, but most of it.
What's that? Yeah? Okay. And we are all a mix of things, too. So teaching the visual learner. So if you have people in your class who are visual learners and by nature, you might want to have them take notes or give them handouts. I'm sorry, you guys, I didn't give you handouts today. I don't like handouts personally because even if I take handouts and I take them home, I never ever look at them again. Most people don't. But anyhow, that sort of thing, having them in their hands can be more helpful to a person. Use pictures or videos in presentations if you want to reach these people. Show charts, graphs, maps, anything you can, something they can look at. Demonstrate things rather than describe them. Does that work well with your kids and Pathfinders and Adventurers? Demonstrating things, isn't that much more fun? Bring exhibits and visual aids. Okay? So that's all of them for that particular one. I mean, there's other things you can do, of course. These are just, the ideas that I have. So let's give an example here. I thought, okay, so what can we do here maybe in learning a Bible verse that might work? This is just one crazy idea that I came up with. So I thought, okay, well, how about we put together these little pictures here that kind of mirror the verse? So Genesis 9:13. Let's try to learn it here together. Okay, let's all read it together and look at the pictures kind of as you read it. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Let's do it one more time. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. All right. That was pretty fast. Let's try it, see how many of us can do it. I'm not going to say it. Okay? I'll start you, though. I set my... Wow. Now, we still have the signs here, right? But I bet you could do this 2 or 3 more times just looking at the signs, and we could take it away, and then you could probably actually say it. I don't know if you want to try it already, but anybody want to try it? Sure. Okay, go for it. I set my... And how many of you saw those things going through your brain as you were saying the verse? Yeah? Does it help? Yeah, isn't that interesting? The auditory learner. Okay, so how many of you kind of thought you came up with the score, you're maybe a little more slanted towards audio learning? Anybody? Auditory. 1, 2, 3. Okay, but we all have some of it, right? Nobody scored like, I guess it would be a 10. Anybody scored a 10, right?
Well, I was
13? Wow. 14? Okay. 11? Wow. Okay, yeah, that's like almost by the bottom. Okay, but you probably have a few auditory learners in your groups. So those people enjoy talking. And again, this is generalization. You may or may not be able to identify with this. Lots of verbal noises. Talks to self, whispers aloud while reading, hums, all that. Ever had a kid like this? Sounds like easily distracted. Has difficulty with written directions. Memorizes by steps. Enjoys music and listening to stories. Easily distracted by noises. Outgoing. Again, these are generalizations, not necessarily 100%. Okay, teaching the auditory learner. Here's some things you can do. Lectures, storytelling. Anybody like a good story?
I love telling.
Yeah. Stories around the campfire?
Yes.
Yeah, right? Play music or stories. Use rhymes, poems, theatrics, maybe a little drama presentation. That might help with the visual learners too. And the kinesthetic learners if they're the ones who are doing the drama.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten there yet, but. All right, so learning a verse an auditory way. What would be one way of learning a verse an auditory way? Singing. Can anybody think, repetition? Yeah, that too, that's true. So anybody think of a Bible verse that's been set to music?
Micah 6:8.
Micah 6:8. He hath shown thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Yeah, and the hallelujah, 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 right? Wow, okay, so that's a blast from the past for me, from when I was a kid, and boom, it just comes out. How many of you knew that song from some time in ancient history, at least? Okay, yeah? And did it pop out pretty easily? Music, even amongst most people, if you can carry a tune, is one of the more powerful ways of remembering things. If you can ever set words to music, it'll come back more and much easier than other fashions. Oh, Estee wants to talk here too. You have a microphone.
I have a microphone.
You have a microphone.
Oh my goodness, I have a microphone. Just an interesting thing about that, music actually is one of the things that sticks in your brain the longest. I work with a lot of elderly people. I work in a nursing home. And a lot of times people get to the point where they cannot even put two words together in a sentence that makes sense, but they still remember every word to a song, or they could play the piano in a recognizable tune. They might not remember that they already played it 5 times, but the music sticks with you longer. So just, it gets stored in a different part of your brain.
Set it down or hold on to it.
Can we go back 2 slides? Teaching.
That?
No, well, that too, but can we like go back to the visual learner, like
Sure.
visual characteristics?
The auditory.
Got that? This one?
Yeah, and then the visual one. Yeah.
Let's go to the beginning. That one?
No, the one previous.
What? What? That one. Zoom, 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 zoom. There we go. Right? Am I in the right spot?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why do you think we don't seem to be putting music to Bible verses like we used to? Like if you go in the late 60s and 70s, you had all kinds of praise books
Yeah.
based on scripture, and we don't seem to do that anymore.
Let's do it. Let's do it again.
That's an interesting point. Do you guys all hear that?
Yeah,
That we don't seem to have as many that are put word for word to music anymore. We have more people interpreting praise songs and whatnot. Yeah.
I think it's starting.
You think it's starting again?
Last couple of years, it is being implemented.
Derek Morris,
That's awesome.
him and his wife sing tons of scripture songs.
Yeah, I think there was a gap there for a long time.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think the last couple of years.
Well, that's great. Now, we have a number of young people in here, right? Okay, you guys. Songs are written by people. It doesn't have to be some famous person. You might be them. You just don't know it yet. So, yeah, I think it would be a very, very valid and very helpful thing, even if the songs are only used within your own club. I mean, that could be a powerful ministry right there. Kinesthetic learner. This person is typically always in motion. I think of one of my best friends from when I was a kid. Oh, my word. Touches people when in conversation. Now, some of that is cultural, too. Okay? It's not just the kinesthetic learner. Taps while concentrating. Oh. Right? You're taking a test and halfway across the classroom.
So much trouble because I run my fingers aggressively on the desk while thinking, and they're like,
That's great.
"Stop."
Or clicking the pen.
Poor spelling. Yeah. Outgoing. Again. I think that was in the other one, too. Physical expression of emotions. Talks with hands. And I've got another point or two here for you guys that are taking pictures. Dresses for comfort rather than appearance. And here's the last one. Wants to touch things. So, I mean, obviously, there's probably other characteristics as well. But kind of gives you an idea, right?
Like, I hit almost all those points, which is hilarious because I've known I'm like a kinesthetic visual learner.
Sure.
And so it's just hilarious to see that. I'm like, terrible.
Isn't it weird to kind of see, a presentation like this, you think, I'm unique. Oh, maybe. All right, teaching the kinesthetic learner. So, hands-on sorts of things, exercises. Well, hands-on exercises, but literally exercises too. Feel, smell, taste. Our rock climbing, mountain bike events, things like that. Activities that require movement. Sitting still, listening to a lecture? Not so much. Not so much. How do we usually teach people?
Sitting in a lecture.
Yes, like right now. Role playing, skits. That's a really good way of teaching, especially if the ones who are doing the learning are the ones doing the role playing. Have you ever done that as a teacher when you're teaching anything in Pathfinders? If you want them to really learn something, sometimes on some of our mountain bike events, we haven't always done it, but there's the IMBA, International Mountain Bike Association, rules of the trails, and we will break them up into smaller groups, and each group has to give a skit on one of the rules of the trail, and ingrains it in the brain by doing that. Have them write down key things, because that kinesthetic, that process of writing it down. Drawing, painting of concepts. Art projects.
Love those.
I heard a no. Student involvement up front on the board. And that's the last one of those, so I'll pause for a second if you're taking pictures. So I struggled to try to come up with a learning a verse kinesthetic way, and Este has a great idea. And I have this verse here too.
Yeah, we can
Let's try this one here first, okay?
Well, we'll do this verse both ways.
Okay, we'll do this verse both ways. Go ahead.
Okay, so actually, let's do your way first,
Okay.
because my way involves more movement.
All right. I can't hold the microphone. It is at the same time. So, you guys ready? You guys know the song? Clap. What is it?
Clap your hands.
Yeah.
It's all you need.
Yeah.
Shout to the Lord with the voice of triumph.
Yep, that one. All right, here we go. Clap hands, all ye people. Shout to the Lord with a voice of triumph. Clap your hands, all ye people. Shout to the Lord with a voice of praise. Hosanna, Hosanna. Shout to the Lord with a voice of triumph. Praise Him, praise Him. Shout to the Lord with a voice of praise. So did you catch those different things in there? You know, the shouting, the junior pathfinders and the adventurers, they like the shouting part, right? Yeah. So, and the clapping part and all that.
All right, for the next part, for the other way to learn a verse this way, all you need is a piece of paper, and you crumple it up into a ball, and then everybody get in a circle.
You don't have to.
Actually,
You want some to?
yeah, let's go ahead and try it. Why don't we make 2 circles, and somebody else in one of the groups find a piece of paper and crumple it.
So split. Circle over here, circle over here.
Yep.
You can go around the chairs or whatever. Through the chairs, whatever.
Yeah, just make a circle. Doesn't have to be perfect. We just need one paper ball per circle. We can make more circles if you think that would be easier. All right, and then whoever has the paper ball, you're going to toss. We've got one up here you can have.
Incoming!
All right, so it's a pretty simple thing, but it works well with especially younger Pathfinders. It can work with anybody. So what
And
you
you
do
might
is,
want smaller groups when you actually do this with the kids.
so you take the ball, and when you have the ball, you say one word of the verse. So the first person would say, oh, and then you toss it to someone else, and that person has to say the next word, clap. So go ahead and try this verse that way.
So you say it, you throw it. You say it, you throw it. Toss, not throw, perhaps. Maybe that's a better word, toss. When you got all the way through the verse, raise your hands. You guys can keep going. These guys are slow over here.
They keep throwing the ball into the chairs.
You could say the
You got it? Okay, I'm going to blank it. All right, so this
try it
group
again.
over here, see if you can say it together. Ready? Go.
All
Okay,
right, good job.
great. Over here, you guys ready? Clap. Ready, ready, ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Good
All right.
job. You
Did you
guys all
find
did it.
yourselves, as someone is getting ready to throw it, you're kind of anticipating the next word in your own head?
All right,
Some
you
of
can sit down.
Yeah, you can sit down. But so that might be something you could try and see how it works. Especially in smaller groups, I think might be most effective. Thank you. Okay. So, mechanics of learning, more about the mechanics of learning. What time are we? Oh, good. We still have some time. Maturity level. Does that play at all into how you teach something? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. All right. How about motivation, personal motivation? If somebody comes to you, maybe a kid who's taking some honor who, didn't want to be in that honor class, the boy is in the macrame class and he's looking at you like, why am I here? So personal motivation matters. Past experiences. Does that make a difference? That can make a big difference as to whether, this is really sensitive, how well they can identify with something, how easily they can process something. Energy levels. Here's something you may not always think about. Hunger and thirst. Does that make a difference? Yeah. And in general, physical comfort. So, taking somebody outside to learn something can be an awesome thing, except if it's really, what's that?
Except if it's freezing and they're only wearing a t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah, exactly. If it's freezing cold out there, we used to try that with our rock climbing, our first couple rock climbing events. We were camping down in the Columbia River Gorge in March. Need I say more? We're huddled around in the evening trying to tie knots, and the kids are all hunkered down with their hoodies and everything. I don't know if they learned anything at all, but keys to successful teaching. Some things like the delivery. So, what is the goal of your lesson? If you just start rattling off and it's not on something and it's not really clear where you're headed, it can be more difficult. Some people think better about a subject if they know where you're headed with it. I'm one of those people. So I like to have a summary kind of at the beginning so that I know where we're headed. Otherwise, I don't have context to hang the individual pieces on. Does that make sense? It makes a difference for some people. Vary your methods per the different learning styles. Not everybody is all one. We learned that, right? Yeah. Just now, okay? So use different things and you'll be more successful at them retaining it. Reinforce and practice. So you might say things more than once, you might do things more than once, you might do them in multiple fashions. Organization and sequencing. Does that make a difference? You know what I'm talking about when I say the sequencing of things? So that one thing builds on the other, or that you're not jumping back and forth. When someone, have you ever had someone tell you a story and they're kind of jumping all over on the timeline? When they're done telling the story, do you have any idea what actually happened? Maybe, right? But, you know, as far as you've been able to repeat it back, probably not going to happen very well. Clarity of speech. So if I'm like this the whole time, can you hear me very well? And if I'm teaching the whole class like this, versus if I'm like this, is this a little easier for you to learn? So I work in a public school district in technology, and one of the things that we do in all of our new classrooms is we have what's called a voice lift system, where the teachers wear some sort of a microphone and there are speakers throughout the classroom so that the kids can hear it. It's proven that the better clarity of speech, the more a person is able to actually absorb it. Yes?
And I don't think that necessarily just speaks to volume. Pronunciation.
Oh my goodness, yes. Pronunciation and enunciation. So someone who's kind of mumbling in the word, yeah, right? That's one thing. When you have a chance actually to teach that thing with your kids when you are doing presentations up front with them, Pathfinder Sabbath, things like that. Okay. Try not to get on too much of a soapbox here, but so if you're going to do a Pathfinder Sabbath or something, this is a learning opportunity. Have practices ahead of time. You are setting your kids up for failure if you just simply expect them to wing it. Okay? And coach them a little bit on speech, not in a mean fashion, but help them, and because they need to learn that same skill too. Your personal attitude. If you're excited about something, they're more likely to be interested in learning it. Am I right? Yeah? But, okay. I'm trying to think of cases in point, but I think we can probably all think of situations where, you know, it's been a boring subject. I had my history teacher in academy was a person that kind of droned on and on and on and said the same thing at the same level, the same way all the time through. And oh my goodness, yeah.
What if you're teaching an honor for a particular class that's required for them, and you don't like that honor, you don't want to teach that honor, you have no interest in it.
Figure out some way to think positively.
Well,
That's right.
I think that's a good example of resource development.
Yeah.
If you know you don't like that honor, find someone else to teach it.
Yeah, so you drawing on someone else to help out, at least in some fashion, even if not the whole thing, is very good. Sometimes we have to put on a happy face and pull, kind of pray to God for some energy deep down inside and, try to make it happen. Yeah? Go ahead. Okay. I thought somebody had a suggestion or something. All right.
No, I stretched, sorry.
Are you stretched? Okay. It's allowed. It's okay. Attentiveness to the students. What is this talking about?
Read if they're getting or not.
Sure. Well, I don't know. Just say it louder. Enunciate. What did you say? Who was it?
Somebody over here said interaction.
I forgot about this stuff. Who was it? Said it? Interaction. Where are you?
I can see her.
Okay. Chocolate. What's that?
Watching their facial expression.
Watching for facial expressions. Oops.
Your audience behind, make sure they're with you too.
Yeah.
You're not just behind you.
Keep them engaged.
Keep them engaged. Wow, we got lots of answers. Rewards. Oh, no. Yeah, look for facial expressions and all that sort of thing. Where are you here? All right, nice. You know, when you can't see your audience and you're just throwing things out here where you can kind of hear the voice come from.
Listen to what they're saying.
Listen to what, oh my goodness, really? I'll try here. Watch your head. So listen to what the kids are saying. So have you seen this? Have you seen maybe the opposite of this, where someone is up, they're teaching this thing and their head is down, and the kids are, they're not with you at all.
Shoulders hunched, and in a monotone voice. That was our math class, and I was like, so bored. I started doing other projects.
And then the math class is right after lunch, right?
Yes!
Yeah, I know. That's why I switched majors in college. 3 weeks into Calc 2. Can I change majors, please? My math classes were always right after lunch. Imagination and personal experiences. So personal stories. They can have an impact. Use them in your teaching. Everybody loves a sidetrack. Am I right? Kids? Yeah. Teachers are teaching you kids who are in school currently, you know who your teachers are who are easily sidetracked, right?
Yes!
Are any of you ever guilty of sidetracking them? Yes.
Stuck on the history, and he will spend 2 whole classes on that, and then be like, oh wait, I was supposed to be teaching you guys this.
But you look forward to those classes, do you not?
Yes!
Yes, of course. Here, chocolate. Incoming. All right.
Can you go back? I didn't know that was the last one.
Oh, sorry. There you go. Last one. Last bullet point.
When you speak from personal experiences, it makes you more relatable as well.
Okay.
Yep.
More chocolate. All right. Keys to successful teaching, the physical environment. Oh, we kind of talked about that a little bit. Like my pictures there.
I do.
So, lighting. You can see us up front here. You can't see anything that you're doing, but if you're going to be working on something, a project, you probably need to be able to see it. Temperature in the room or outside, wherever it is your classroom is going to be. Wind, sand, mud, bugs, strong smells, all that stuff. Kids especially are going to be hypersensitive to a lot of that stuff. Am I right?
Bugs.
Bugs.
That reminds me of a story.
Yeah? Canoeing?
Canoeing.
Oh, my word.
So on one of our canoeing events early on, we ended up having way too many stations, way too close together. And we had parked those stations in mosquito land.
This was on a river.
It was a river,
Fast-moving river.
I swear the mosquitoes were twice the size of normal mosquitoes, and they bred like rabbits.
And they love DEET.
They did, yeah.
So if you were wearing
They actually,
off.
people who were
Or-
spraying DEET repellent, didn't matter.
No.
One girl got in the water and pulled her hoodie up, so the water was up to here, and she had her hoodie up and just hunched like this. Well, guess what? When we got back to camp and she changed, her back was covered in
Just
mosquito
welts.
bites.
Yeah.
The only way to get away from them was to paddle across the river back and forth.
Right. So that was a fail on our part, right?
Yeah, but that's what, when you say bugs, I don't think the kids were listening to much at that point.
Probably not. Sound. So this may be either sound from whoever's presenting or distracting sounds in the area. Comfortable seating. Time between breaks. Can you expect kids to sit still and pay close attention for an hour at a time with no breaks?
Nope.
And as you get younger, you have to take more frequent breaks. Am I right? Of course, people don't get younger, right? But you know what I'm saying. The younger ones need to have more frequent breaks than the older ones do.
Does anybody know how long can somebody listen?
2 times their age, isn't it?
I'm not even sure it's that long.
15 minutes or
10 to 15 minutes, even for adults, actually.
Truly.
Yep. There has.
so. Catch them in 5 minutes, you've lost them. If you don't.
If you don't catch their attention in the first couple minutes, yep.
Yep, and that's just something for you as a learner yourself. If you're teaching yourself something or reading something, you need to remember. There's a thing called the Pomodoro Technique. Look it up. It has to do with concentrating deeply on something for 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5-minute break. I teach it to college students that I mentor.
Pomodoro?
Pomodoro is an Italian word for tomato. Pomodoro, Pomodora. Pomodoro.
Dora.
I think maybe it is O on the end. Pomodoro. I think it's an O at the end. Yeah. Sorry. I was visualizing it, but I remember how it's pronounced. So. Seating arrangement. Does this make a difference?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you more likely to have their attention if they're seated in rows like this, or if they're seated in a semicircle around in front of you?
Do this semicircle around you because in rows they're going to flop on the chairs or on you.
Yep, and it's an automatic barrier between you and them, okay? They feel safer to do their own thing if they have that barrier.
So the way we're sitting today is not ideal.
It's not ideal for kids. Unfortunately, it becomes necessary, right, when you have enough people. So smaller groups are always going to be to your advantage when you're teaching. That's why when we do Teen Extreme stuff, we always break people up into small groups for our Sabbath morning teaching stuff. Small being relative. I mean, if you have 120 people sometimes, and you
Might
have...
be a group of 12.
Might be a group of 12, but yeah. The people, in other words, so the relationships, the climate tensions and all that sort. This is the last slide, the last bullet for this slide if you're taking pictures or anything.
4 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to have to buzz through stuff here pretty quick because we have several slides left, but here's some quick things we can look at. So about teaching resources, things that you can use. So things you might already have on hand, of course. Think about people as being resources, other people, even people who are not in the club. Okay, and it might be professional people, like adventurers. I know a favorite is to bring in like police or firemen, people from parks, city recreation departments, whatever. Things you can make or develop. Some people are way better at that than I am. Items that you can go out and buy. I have fun with this sometimes when it comes to like a big fair event or something. Hang on to resources for the future. If you make note of things.
A big storage area.
Yeah, like our shed. I don't know if you're taking a picture of that or not, but. So types of teaching resources, again, I kind of alluded to in the last slide. People. Places can be resources. Had you thought of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
One person in our class on Sabbath morning actually talked about how she went and had the park ranger out at Bennington Lake, which is near Walla Walla, teach the kids about animal tracking. And she said that was a great idea because they ended up learning about all kinds of animals she didn't even know were there. And in the past, she had tried to do everything herself. So it's good to recruit other people.
Media. Collect magazines, perhaps. Sometimes Estee likes to do that. The pictures that are in the magazines, doesn't matter what they're selling, right? They can be useful. Oh, sorry. There you go, if you want it. Next is logistics in resource selection. So, like the venue may require, the place you need to go may require some permissions or transportation or whatever. The number of people who are going to be part of it, that's important for you to figure out. The personal qualifications or lack thereof, and whoever you need to teach this thing. Like, we haven't done a canoeing event for a few years because our person who was our whitewater safety certified person moved away because we did whitewater canoeing. Can you imagine canoes on whitewater?
That is a bad idea.
No, it's awesome.
It's actually really,
So much
really fun. Lake canoeing is boring by comparison.
Oh, I know. We take care of the whole canoeing honor in one day.
Half a day.
Yeah, out on a lake, and then the rest of the weekend on Sabbath and Sunday we spend on whitewater.
It is.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to get whitewater certified so we can
Do it again.
we haven't had time.
So worships, forcing kids to sit completely still, right? Not realistic. Nor is it ethical in my mind. Don't do it. Implying that kids should feel a certain emotion. Have you heard people, you really, you ought to just
Feel it.
feel the love for God. You ought to, don't you hate that?
It's like,
Self-imposed feelings, how well do those work? Or externally imposed feeling, any sort of imposed feelings. Creating an exciting environment, then expecting reverent behavior.
I've seen that done in adventure class.
Going to the gym.
Well, it wasn't even that. They were doing for worship, they were doing a boys versus girls answers thing, and the way the kids were supposed to let them know that they had the answer was to stand up. And then they were upset that they were being noisy. It's like,
Because
you can't
noise and
do both. You
activity
can't
goes
play
hand in
a
hand
game
with kids, especially
and not
little
be
kids.
noisy. So if you don't want to do noisy worship, then don't do a game.
Right. Oh, sorry. And who's our next presenter here? Because okay. All right. Yeah, we don't want to run over here. We are already running over by 1 minute, so.
Okay.
Positive experiences, I'm just going to give you all the bullet points. Oop, Is
Yep.
that right? Yep. Kids can tell if somebody's not genuine, am I right?
Keep it short.
Use the different learning styles, make it short and clear. Teen extreme, we rarely choose pastors to be our speaker. Because why?
tell them.
They like to talk a lot. Some of them do good, but no offense to any pastors who happen to be in the room.
We love pastors.
Yeah. We love pastors.
We do.
We do. Oh, okay. I'm going to get shot here, though, right on the spot. You're going to witness it if I don't hurry up. All right. So, yep. This is more just the mechanics of things.
Any
I trust you can
questions
read.
about these?
Make it a safe time for expressions. That's important. No dictating emotions.
But accepting them.
But
it should be about a relationship, not a dictatorship.
there we
Yeah,
go.
that's a good point.
There we
Yeah, I
go.
like that. She said, make it about a relationship, not a dictatorship.
I think we already kind of, this is, okay. The last two things you see there, the junior PowerPoints is really good too. Take a picture of that maybe if you're interested and look it up later on your own. Project Learning Tree and Project Wild, those are secular resources that can be very nicely used for spiritual games and learning lessons and outdoor stuff.
Yeah, they are made to teach kids about outdoors, but it's easy to take those and add a spiritual component to it. And then the Junior Point Sabbath School is made for the Sabbath School lessons, but the little exercise we did with the paper balls, that's actually that's an exercise I got from that website.
And of course, AY honors, duh, right? And dink. Some guidelines, yeah. This is really, I think I prepared this for a 2-hour session, but we had 1 hour, so there you have it. And, yeah, that's us.
All right.
So, all right.
Michael?
Thanks, you guys. And I have more candy. Candy? Anybody? Candy? Woo! Maybe I should just like let people come get it, right?
Folded in my pocket. I'm going to prove that you don't need anything else. Yeah. I do, but I'm thinking if I want it slim. Meditate on that. I was thinking about it on my way here. It's like, should I do this one thing? Should I not? We'll just see. I don't think so. Yeah, give it to me. And I need a balled up piece of paper with a certain level of aerodynamics. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do this. All right. I'm going to keep this right here, and I'll grab it. I want that there, yeah. Okay. I assume these people are here for the other thing. After church, I'm like chasing it. So the sound people have to remind me not to do that. Okay, Elliot, whenever you want to do it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Smith. I'm the associate pastor at the Spokane Valley Adventist Church. That's, just down the road. Are any of my people here? Oh, yeah, Marilyn Salmon. That's one of my elders back there waving. We view her in high esteem. So Richie Brower asked me to do a little bit of talking about how we can increase some of the creativity that we experience in our worship time. Who here does? There's we'll call it a season of worship in your weekly activity. as a Pathfinder or Adventure leader? Most of us, yeah, there's a worship time. Okay. Or when you're on campouts, you do worships, right? Who here has done one that was bad?
Oh, well,
If you're not raising your hand, you need to think a little more clearly about how you're doing things, because I guarantee you that we have all done one that was not great. So, unless, of course, maybe you've done one, and that one went well. So you keep that, just never do one again, and you'll keep your record spotless. I'm just going to give you a couple of very practical ideas that are going to help you to start thinking about how you can increase some of the creativity that is going to be seeded into the way you do your worship talks. And it's really worth it. Now, some of us may think because the time period is short that it has less impact. That's not true. The short stories can have big impacts that can help kids to start taking those first steps towards a better knowledge about Jesus. And then moving towards that action and relationship and those discipleship things that we want. I'm going to tell you also, and I'm going to try to not trip over these things. I am a pacer, and I talk with my hands, which is why I'm very grateful that they did not give me a hand mic, because it would have hit you. Once when I was working here, I was the assistant director here for a few years. There was a song that requires me to go like this a lot, and there is a pond up at the upper at a campfire bowl. And I made it almost all the way to the water from the stage with that microphone just hurtling off. It did. It is in service to this day, I believe. So, and again, these short worships are super impactful. Short stories can have major impacts on how we think and how we continue to talk about them. For instance, I'm going to give you just a couple of things that are going to help you think about how stories can help you think about things long term. There was a young deer. His mother passes away. He is raised in a different set of circumstances. What is this story? Bambi, yeah, right? Okay. There was a man, he had 2 sons. Sounding a little familiar? Not yet? Okay, one son tells his father that he wants his share of the inheritance. That story is about this long. You remember it 2,000 years after it was told. Jesus uses this method. He doesn't view himself as being too good for it, and so I like to think that, if it's not too good for Jesus, it's probably not too good for me. So, let's talk a little bit about 3 practical ways that we can start improving the way we talk. First, actually, let's talk about what is the point of a worship talk. Well, it is to reveal and educate and inspire young people and show what are we revealing and inspiring them towards? Jesus. We want to show them a clearer picture of who Jesus Christ is. And again, worship talks are not the most important thing you do. The most important thing you do when you're working with young people is you are spending time and building relationships with them, letting them know that you care. Yes?
Are we going to be using the slide? If not, can we turn on lights?
Yes, we can turn on the lights.
It's hard to see.
No worries. Yes, I will not be using slides. Mainly because they asked me on Wednesday and I didn't have much time. So, the first thing that is going to be very helpful to you is telling stories.
Lots of stories. Stories are like what gets the kids listening. They
Yes.
want a story.
Stories are very helpful. And again, it was said this morning, children stories. Everybody loves a good story. I do. Almost every time I have a conversation with somebody, especially in pastoral responsibilities, I often interject stories because that is kind of who I am. I just love telling stories. So, to give you an example of this, and then we'll talk about it in a minute. I took a vacation recently, and by that I mean maybe a year ago, I don't take vacations very much. They make me nervous. Other places. What do I need? New places, I tell my wife. Well, if they were so great, where have they been all this time? So, and you know, when I was younger, I was working here at summer camp throughout the summer, so there was not much of a vacation time there. We went off to Hawaii. It was a real trial. You know, sunny, very relaxing. This was in early March, which in Spokane is sort of like, yeah, it's like you have experienced something good for a while, and then life slaps you in the face, and it snows again. So we're there, and I'm in the water, and I love snorkeling. It is a very relaxing thing for me, and I don't get to do it much in Spokane. As any of you who have driven through Spokane know, that there is not a large body of water nearby. And Maui is sort of shaped in such a way that it has a series of other islands right next to it, and it creates this little bowl in the ocean. So in comparison to other spots in the ocean, it is relatively shallow. Now, because of this, humpback whales come into this area to have their babies. They do this because it's safe there, because predators generally do not come into this shallower area, and humpback whales emit a sound. I will not be replicating it for you. They do this by using a certain, what's called a resonance chamber, I believe. It's in the back of their, what is essentially their throat. And if you're wondering where's the throat of a whale, find a marine biologist. I'm a religious studies major. So, and that resonance helps them create that long wailing sound that you hear. And it can be heard, scientists say, at certain conditions up to 10,000 miles away by other whales. They're singing, and it is actually a proper song. It uses phrases that change and adapt over time and generations. New whales come in and improvise upon the song, so there is a chorus and a verse and a chorus and a verse. And what is remarkable about these whales is that they are so loud that if your head is underwater during a certain time of year, you can hear them. Just with your ears. You don't need any special equipment or anything. You can hear the song all around you. And I had been snorkeling a few days, and you know, I'm going to show you, like, see, like I'm very pale, and I seared like an ahi tuna, like burnt to a crisp. And so I decided to lay off, you know, exposing my pale body to the universe. And we went whale watching tour, and that is where I learned that you could hear them as long as your head was underwater from these people who were experts in whale behavior and songs and things. And I was thinking, no way. I've been swimming before out here, my head was underwater, and I couldn't hear a thing. I was aware of my, you know, breathing, and I was aware periodically of my wife nearby, and I just could not hear it. So I decided I was going to experiment with this. We were going to go swimming again. My wife and I, we went back into the water that afternoon after having lunch, after waiting, you know, the requisite amount of time to avoid cramping. And we're in the water, and my wife starts tapping me furiously in the water. This is not a thing I really enjoyed feeling at first, because I'm like, great, there's a shark or something, we're gonna die here, what a vacation. Should have stayed in Spokane. And I look at her as quickly as my head could move, and she's pointing at her ear. And I'm like, what is this motion? What is this? She's wanting me to listen. And my ears start tuning in to the song I hear everywhere. In the most mundane parts of the ocean where there was nothing but sand, all of a sudden the whole place came alive because I could hear it. You could hear different whales singing as though they were in the next room. Loud and clear. I pulled out my GoPro camera and I recorded the songs. You could hear it. Beautiful, wonderful songs all around me. But all it took was for me to stop hearing it. All it took was for me to start getting distracted. Is that I'd start looking at this sort of fish, or I'd think about that, or my wife, I was brought up in Florida, so I know about riptides and different things that the ocean can do, so I'm keeping aware. But my wife is a missionary kid from Albania, where they don't swim or anything there, so I'm always like keeping an eye on her, because my wife is the one that takes care of everything in the house, so if she was to get swept out to sea, I would be devastated in multiple ways. But all I wanted after I could hear this song everywhere was just to experience it more and more. And when I would come up out of the water, I'd stick my head up and I would be expecting to hear all these other people around me saying how cool it was that they could hear these gigantic whales singing all around them, that you could see periodically them exploding out of the water. No one else could hear it. They just couldn't. They just hadn't tuned their ear in to this wonderful song that was all around them. And all I wanted was just tell somebody, grab them by the shoulders, like, don't you hear it? Don't you hear how beautiful this is? How it could change the whole way you look at your world right now. This is how I view God. That there is a God who is pouring love out across all the people I encounter each and every day. And all it takes is for me to tune in and remember that my God loves me. That I am passionately and wildly loved by Jesus. And that he loves all you people in this room. And that person who cut me off this morning on the way here, that is passionately loved by Jesus. And that all it takes for me to stop hearing it, to stop being aware of the love of Jesus poured out across this world, is for me to get just a little bit distracted. Just distracted enough for me to start thinking about me. For me to start thinking about how these people make me feel bad. Or how I would like this person to be punished in this way. Or I think, these myriad of distractions that we experience. When it's still there. It didn't go anywhere. The love of Christ is here among us now. Jesus, God, living inside of us when we allow him to. All it takes is for us to tune him out. And it can be so easy, can't it? Okay, so first we started talking about whales, right? And you were wondering, where are we going with this? Correct? Because whales, while they are created by our marvelous and wonderful God, are not immediately relevant to Scripture, except for maybe Jonah. What I did was we were creating tension there. So your brain was starting to work out, okay, we're talking about whales, and I kind of was buying you into this. Helping to paint with words, right? And then we shifted, I used certain key words. The whole place became alive. Just as when we tune ourselves into the love of Jesus, that all of a sudden our world can become alive. It helps us to change the way we look at our world, right? Those are parallels that we're drawing. So with the story, we are helping the audience to start working their brain in the way we want them to. Now, this is not because we're trying to hypnotize them, though, working with some Pathfinder clubs, it might be nice from time to time. if you could. No, we're simply trying to set an emotional stage, right? So that you can then slip into the more important thing. The whale, glorious animal, but is far less important and valuable to our everyday life than me recognizing that, wow, Jesus really loves me. In fact, he loves everybody. And that when I allow that to come inside of me, when I open up my heart and my ears and my eyes to that, it can change the way I view the people around me. So, I'm going to take a second look at my notes. Okay. So what are some of the benefits of stories? Well, one is that stories can help you retain attention for longer periods of time. I have had kids, I don't know, how long was I talking on the bus? Sometimes an hour. I could tell them a story for like an hour. And they were with me. I could see them engaging and looking at me, with me. And young people, probably, I would say it starts to shift up around 13 or so. But young people show that they are listening in different ways than you and I show it. So most of the time, the way we show as adults that we are listening is that we are, looking at the person. We're sometimes giving that agreeable nod that some of you are giving, and I really appreciate that. That's like candy for a pastor to see that nod. Thank you. That nod is sometimes all you need to get you through 25 minutes. But for young people, sometimes what they are doing when they are wanting to show you that they are paying attention is they will start asking questions of it. So that's why it's important to keep flexibility. Sometimes I tell them, hang on one second. I'll take questions in a minute. But sometimes you'll see a kid in the middle of the story. They're like about to explode. You see the hand is shaking. Like the pressure has built up inside of their bodies. That like, they heard what you said. And now they want to comment on it. That is how some of the ways young people show that they are paying attention. They also give the lean, right? You know when you've got them, right? You see them leaning in. And they've got that crazed look in their eye, like your dog when you show them a piece of meat. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. So that it helps us retain attention for longer periods of time. The other is that it can help to internalize and sort of demystify some more complex topics. So, for instance, loneliness is an abstract topic, correct? But I want to express to you what it is like to feel lonely. So, I may use a story or a situation, we call this process free association, where we use an example or an abstract topic and we couple it with a story that is sometimes unrelated, but ultimately helps you to couple them together. So, for instance, I want you to know how it feels to be lonely. Have you ever been in a bathroom trying to wash your hands with those automatic hand washers, and everybody else's is working, but you're the one dummy who can't figure it out? And you're waving at it like you're sending expletives out at this thing in the American Sign Language, trying to like get the birds and seeing if you can, and you get more vigorous, and then you watch as these other people, they're coming in and out, no problem. They're able to put their hand under there. They've washed their hands. 6 people and an elderly man have now come in and washed their hands all around you, and you can't get it to work. And then sometimes, you shift over to the one next to you because you're like, that one worked for the last guy. And now it doesn't work either. Everybody else, it was working for everybody else, but you, it wasn't working for. Now have I expressed to you a feeling of loneliness, albeit in a humorous situation, right? You get the idea a little better. So we're taking the abstract or the very complex And we are now funneling it into a situation or story that helps it to be more easily understood. It can also be advantageous to you to, if you have a longer story, break it up into pieces and tell it as a series. My favorite thing to do to my Pathfinders, and when I preach here at summer camp, is to leave what we call, what is it? What do I do? Do you remember? Yes, I leave a cliffhanger because now I have them. And they can, and when I come back the next day, I can ask them, okay, where was I? And they will tell me exactly what had happened in the last situation and what the moral that we were talking about yesterday was. One of my favorites, and I'm going to give it to you, is an author by the name of Lawrence Anthony. Look him up. He is called he passed away, I believe, a few years back. He called The Elephant Whisperer is his best book. And it is about how he found there was this herd of elephants that was going to be shot and killed if he did not take them into his private game preserve. And so he saves them from death, bringing them in, even though they are troublesome, problematic animals. And he brings them into his game preserve. And it is essentially a story about how he enters into the life of these elephants and works with them, helping them to not be problem elephants, but now to be good elephants. Okay? Now, that sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? That Christ, seeing you and I in a sin-filled state, sees that death is the other option and chooses to rescue us. And then we can talk about the process by which Jesus works with people in their lives through the context of the story of these elephants. So when you have a long story or a book, read it through and break it up into its pieces. You don't have to tell the whole thing. You can tell the important parts. Break it apart into those pieces and see if there is a spiritual lesson that you can attach to each section of that. And then see if the kids can name the previous ones. I've seen it work very well. I've had kids who can name me every single thing for like 8 weeks on the bus to Oshkosh. We were talking for 2 weeks. They could tell me the lesson of the previous series we had done and all of the lessons we had learned about how Jesus works with us. So this is also beneficial because we now have time that you didn't have before. So if you read the book and you broke it apart into its individual, let's say you have 5 things, you now have 5 weeks of worship talks done. So you don't have to spend your time thinking about what is the topic I'm going to do this week. Now you can spend your time thinking about how can I express this story in a creative and beautiful way to these young people. So you can work less on spending time figuring out, okay, I'm going to use this story and I'm going to talk about this lesson, which sometimes can take us several days out of our week. And if you, like for us, it's Wednesday evening is when Pathfinders meets. I don't have a tremendous amount of time, but when I have this topic already filled out, I have a little outline. Now I can spend those 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, however much time you have, practicing the story. Series, I cannot express to you enough how much a series can do for you. Do a series if you get a chance. And leave a cliffhanger at the end. It does not have to be at an important part. I have left cliffhangers where the man reached up and I said, we'll talk about it tomorrow. He was going to grab a can of peas. But they were waiting for those peas. for 24 hours, and they would bug me all day. Hey, what's he reaching for? What's he gonna grab? Or they would tell me, they would be guessing with me, because now they have bought into the story. They're engaged with it. They want to know what's gonna happen. Where do you find stories? Part of it is challenging at first, because you are practicing what we call active listening. You are going to be actively listening to your world, your circumstances, your life, the things you read, and thinking about, how can this thing that I read that was interesting to me, how can I use that to better serve the kingdom of God? Because we are now in the responsibility of, we are going to take any story we hear, we are going to take it captive, and we are going to make it submissive to Jesus and use it for his ends. Lawrence Anthony is not a Christian, but I use his stories to express morals and lessons that help young people to better understand their place in this world, and that they are loved by Jesus, and that they can now see those different steps that can help them move forward into a better, freer life. So the series also helps you, because now you can take huge ideas and you can break them up into smaller pieces. I own llamas. You can laugh. It's okay. I own 3 llamas, and I am unashamed. How did I get them? That's not what we're here for. In order for them to learn behaviors or tricks or whatever I want them to learn, I break it up into the smallest possible piece so that eventually they can learn it. That's helpful with younger people, and these series can help you break up big spiritual ideas into smaller bite-sized pieces that help them to digest over weeks or days or whatever you want. Okay, let's see. Your personal life is a phenomenal place to look for stories. Do you have a humorous story? Do you have something that grabs you, or particularly about your journey with Christ? I'm going to tell you something. I was debating on whether or not I should. If you feel like you have a story that is you and Jesus that is boring, it's nonsense. Or in the original Greek, this is why your story is never boring, because the King of the universe, the creator of all things, the one who can accomplish any and all actions, intersected with your life as an individual. He met you where you were. Even though you struggle with sins, and they may not be I was killing people the other day, Jesus met me, and now I don't kill people anymore. Bad example, but still. Not that you should have lots of murderers talking to your kids. But you can have subtle, small stories about how your life is being changed by Jesus and how he is leading you forward. And that your story may not be the road to Emmaus, or Damascus, sorry. Long day. The road to Damascus kind of thing. The beam of light comes down and Saul's turned to Paul. It may not be like that. But a tremendous amount of your kids may not experience that kind of story either, so it helps them to see these positive Christian mentors, you, have a story similar to theirs. Helps to validate their story with Jesus. And it helps them to be more open and honest, because you have been open and honest with them. Third thing, YouTube. There is a particular channel known as the Dodo. D-O-D-O. That's the only spelling I will be doing today. It is largely about animals. There is a lot of stories about animals being rescued from bad situations and things like that. These are great fodder for finding stories. What if you find a good story, but you cannot immediately think of a moral that fits with it, or a spiritual idea, or this theological thing? That's okay. When I was taking homiletics at Walla Walla University, that is the fancy word for the gentle art of the sermon. Homiletics. That's your word of the day. And what they encouraged us to do was get a notebook or a file, or open one up on your computer or your phone. Your phones, most of them should have a little notepad thing in there. Find the story. If it was interesting to you, fascinating, it was funny, it said something that made you feel something, write it down. Write down the source so you know where it is, and maybe a little reason why you think it's good, and then save it for later. Because you may come to a point, and you will, when you are hitting a dead spot in your, I don't have any ideas, I don't have anything left to say, I don't have any stories I can think of, I've dried up all the ones I usually tell, then you can open up that file and start reading through, and then you could have 15 stories there. And then you could be, oh, well, this story would work perfectly with what we've been talking about. That is a great habit. Some of the best preachers I know, they do this. They have a file. One of my professors, Dave Thomas, has a literal file this thick of articles and clippings from newspapers and just all sorts of things in there of varying sizes. And he says once a month he goes through these and starts reading them. So that is a good place to start gaining stories. Books, again, be a good reader. Podcasts even. If you're not a voracious turn-the-page kind of reader, Audible is a great resource. The audiobooks, that's how I do it for the most part. I can get through books a lot more rapidly than if I was reading them. So, the next thing, let's talk about these things. All right. Put a little bit of this on your hand. I'll get to you in a moment. Okay. We're talking about props now. This is the second thing. So first thing, stories. Second thing, props. Props are helpful in a myriad of ways. I also put games in this section, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So props. When these things were sitting up here, did they catch your eye for a moment? Why does he own a hairdryer? Because I am married. Does this look like I put a lot of work into it? I do not. So, immediately, I got your brains thinking about some of these things. And in your worship, you could line up some stuff right in front of them. And immediately, their brains are going to start working on some stuff. We'll talk about the honey in a second. No, we'll talk about the honey now. Okay. I've done this. I've done this particular thing twice. I've done it in Pathfinders, and I have done it in my sermon. And my people remember it. Rupert, do you remember? He remembers. And it was, 5 months ago. So, in ancient Israel, around the time Jesus walked the earth, when you were a child, you would have gone to school. They have a very advanced, actually, at times, way of doing education. So during the time period when you were about 6 years old till you were about 10 years old, I believe, you would have been memorizing Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And by the time you were 12 years old, your rabbi could look at you, say, what's this word here? or he would give you a geographic point, so to speak, in a text, and you, as a 12-year-old, would be able to say it. At the more advanced levels, they say that the advanced Talmudim, these were disciples who had spent all their lives studying the Bible, they said they could pass a needle through the Torah and tell you every word it hit. So, the first day of school, you're 6 years old, you walk into school, and the first thing your rabbi does is take your slate and your hands, and he would take a jar of honey, and he would pour it onto that. Your hands, your slate, mind you, you're 6 years old. Anyone seen a 6-year-old handle sticky substances well? Who knows? What prompted these people to do this? I'll tell you what prompted them. This was a hands-on illustration. After he placed it onto their hands, he asked them to lick it off. Generally off of your slate. You do what you need to do. But to lick it off, you would taste it. Now, mind you, this is a time when sugar was not a readily available treat. Honey was about it. It was the most exotic, delicious, flavorful thing you probably ever tasted in your entire life. And as a 6-year-old, anyone seen a 6-year-old say to another piece, like if you gave them a piece of candy, where they say like, "Oh no, I'm good. I don't need any more." No! We have a 2-year-old who stays with us, and her name is Ophelia. She is never content with one piece of candy. The bucket will do. She told me the other day, I think it was, last night or something, I gave her a piece of candy that she had gotten from one of the church things at a harvest festival or something. And I said, here you go. And she said, no, just the bucket, thank you. It's like, where do you get the audacity? No, I said, you'll get this. And I walked away before getting drawn into a debate with somebody who could potentially be my equal. No, because when you tasted that sweetness, you were 6 years old. It was probably the first time you ever tasted anything so delicious and wonderful, and you wanted more. Your rabbi would then say, let it be so with the Word of God. Let the Word of God may be like honey on your tongue. May it be the most wonderful, exotic, flavorful, and wonderful thing that you've ever tasted. And may you want more of it. How many of you got where I was going before I gave the moral? A couple of you? Good. Because that's what we were doing. You started to get the idea before we got there. And I'm okay with that, because that was my intent. I started giving you little buzzwords, and if you didn't get there, it's okay. You're not, there's nothing wrong with you, because you got there at the end with everybody else anyway. We all got to the same place. And people remember these tactile experiences. Another one. Elliot, can I plug this in somewhere? Thank you. Okay. Would somebody be willing to be a victim for a moment? It's not going to hurt. You want to go again? Oh, you. Okay, that's good. Okay, I don't know how these things are used, so. All right. By the way, all the things I'm going to show you here, I've done with children in Pathfinders. So it's completely safe. No children have ever been maimed at the Spokane Valley Adventist Church. So, I'm going to ask you a question. So, here's the question. Was the wind acting upon her in some way? Yes, right? Did you see the air moving at her? Do you see the wind, specifically the wind? Did you see it? No, you did not. So how can you say that it was, you can sit down, thank you, yes. How can you say then that it was acting on her? Okay, you saw it. You saw how the wind acted upon this person. What is the wind compared to in the Bible?
The Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit. That we cannot see where it comes from or where it goes, and yet when the Spirit of God is active in a person's life, can you see how it is affecting them? Oh, yes. And now you have an opportunity to make the kids laugh. Never miss that opportunity. First of all, I feel uncomfortable if somebody doesn't laugh at some point, and I will not feel uncomfortable. So, there are times, though, when we need that more serious element. But when you get them laughing, I had a girl, she was sitting there, and I actually blindfolded her first. And, she was having a good time. The other kids were laughing. Don't pick the kid who is very anxious to do this, because it won't serve them well. But the kids remember this. I did that 2 years ago, something like that, and they still remember it. They remember the times that Pastor Michael poured honey on the hands of a couple kids. Be sure you lay down a tarp first. They remember these things. And there is good biblical precedent for this. The prophets were doing stuff like this all the time. Jeremiah busts into rooms wearing a yoke of an oxen on him. You think people weren't talking about that later? Ezekiel. He cooked with an unconventional substance. We're not going to get into it. You have a Bible. You think people weren't talking about these things? They used these props, these physical manifestations of things, to express their points in a better way, and that people were talking about it later, and that the more they talk about it, they hopefully are also not just linking it to the fact that Pastor Michael poured some honey on some kids, is that they also are linking it to the lesson, which is that the Word of God is sweet and wonderful. So I'm going to race through to the last thing. Where do you find these things? These are some of the harder ones to think about. I'm going to say more when you use it, when your words just are not quite enough, and especially when you don't have a story. When you need to get a little more extra attention. Maybe they've been having some trouble paying attention. You pour honey on a couple kids, you'll get their attention. Let's see. When you want to get them involved, maybe have every single kid put a little dollop of honey on their fingers. They're all now involved. And you may have some kids who are more kinesthetic learners or have these other styles of learning, and usually there is actually a tremendous amount of overlap in the different learning styles. But some of them may grasp it better. You're looking for every single tool you can that is going to be made submissive to Jesus, that is going to help these kids to have a greater experience with Jesus. That we are going to now take every tool we have, if it's a honey bear, if it's a blow dryer, if it's, I don't know. But we're looking for everything we can. A magic trick? Find a way to convert it. Magic tricks are usually really good with Christian things or illusions or whatever you want to call them that makes whatever verbiage works well for you. Because they're usually about destruction of something and restoration. Right? Sin destroys. Jesus what? Restores. There's a wonderful trick on how you can make kids believe that you have crushed a can, like a regular soda can, and you can have them watch before their eyes. It will reinflate. The lid will come back on. I'll show you if you want, but that's a different story. Look up some magic tricks. If you want to just Google magic tricks for the worships, wonderful. If there is a game that works well with these things, Fantastic. You're getting the kids involved. And the more that they are involved, the less likely that they are going to turn on you, so to speak. Because you want to see kids have their hands on it. Because lecture is probably the weakest form of conveying information for tweens, which is the majority of Pathfinders. But you get their hands on it. Anyone been to Israel, perhaps? Okay. I know some people who that's one of their things is that they went to the valley where David and Goliath fought, and they picked up some rocks and they took them home. The kids, they could tell the stories. And this works even for adventurers, is that you tell the kids the story and then you ask them, would you like to touch the rocks from the valley? And they can touch them. These rocks that were sitting there, in theory, right next to the one that took Goliath right in the head. So, look for the tactile. Okay, 3. This is, and I wish I had a little more time, but that's okay. This one is super important. Not that they all aren't. The third thing. So, first, use stories. Second, use props. Third, use them. You have a group of kids there. They are a captive audience of sorts. That's a joke I always avoided using when I was working in the prison ministries. Use them. First off, finish your story. If you have one that perhaps has those lead-in questions and you've seeded the story with little hints here and there about where you were going, ask them, hey, what do you think that this story, how do you think this story translates into our walk with Jesus? So I haven't said, what do you think this story is about? I haven't left it that open, but I've left it just enough open that they could perhaps have the answer I was looking for. Or, and this happens more often than I'd like to admit, they have a better moral to the story than I had, and I was planning it. And sometimes when I hear that, they don't know this, but between you and me, you're not going to tell them. I just go with, that's exactly right. What a great answer. And if it isn't the answer you're looking for, say that anyway. Say that's a really great answer. Anyone else? And you can expound on those other ones, because this is just a thing I think we deal with right now, that young people have, you may have some that have insecurities about being wrong about stuff. As we build trust by spending time with young people, it helps to break down those barriers where they feel fear about things like that. But, it can really be damaging to them if you're like, what do you think this has to do with that? And they say, well, it's this and this. And like, no, that's horrible, that's wrong. Like, and then you just move right past them. Like, we've just left that kid feeling like he's a dummy in front of his friends. That's not the goal. And this is a really, really good one. We do an Ask Anything series. Here's where this comes in. I get a bowl and many pieces of paper, usually 2 per kid. And I tell them, all right, throughout the next, I have 30 kids, so I could do it for an entire session if I want to. That's assuming that each of them each of them asks a unique question. And I say this week, or throughout this next chunk of time, we're going to be talking about the topics you want to talk about. So I say, write down a question you have on anything. It can be a question, and I narrow it down a little bit after I say anything, which always gets one kid who's like, but you said anything. And I'm like, that's enough, Chris. And he's always got something. And so I say about faith, life, relationships, these sorts of things. Give them some topic ideas and then let them write. They have burning questions that are going on inside their heads. And let's say you got 10 kids in your club. You have 10 weeks, in theory, of worships. You can take one worship each week to answer the question, talk about it, and move on. We also do this on campouts sometimes. We will do a bucket, and this one's a little scarier. But we'll take them right out right then. They can be, and they're totally anonymous. So that way, if somebody has that fear of like, well, how old is God? I get that one a lot. If they feel like, hey, this question might be stupid or something, I was like, I never treat any of them like they're stupid. They write it down. I don't know whose it is. They put it in there, and I can take it right out. And I've gotten questions like, how old is God? What's it like to have, what was there before God started creating things? But I've also gotten questions like, why does my dad hit my mom? Or why do people get divorced? How do I be a good Christian when sometimes I do stuff that isn't good? These are some of the things that are going on inside the life of your kids. And sometimes when you get some of those more serious ones, you may want to do a little sleuthing, because it's important that those kids are safe. But also, you are now opening up to them and saying, the things that are going on in your life, in your individual lives, are important. And that it's not just going to be about us picking whatever topic we want to talk about. We are going to talk about the things you want to talk about. And this is, I cannot express how important this is, and this works on almost any age range. We did this as a sermon series, my head pastor and I had, 80-some-year-olds asking complex questions that were well worth it. When I was in college at Walla Walla University, it was the first place I saw this happening. And college students, oddly enough, don't come to church very much. When this series came up, they came in droves. We usually sit in the balcony. That is our domain. It is a drafty domain, but it is ours nonetheless. And, well, it was ours. I no longer fit in there. But it was full of college students who just wanted to know, like, hey, he's talking about the stuff that we asked him to talk about. These big topics that we have. And that when you do it in the way that you are doing one question a week, it gives you lots of time to look into the question and think about it, pray over it. So those are the three things. One thing I would hazard, or I would caution you against, is do not turn worships into a lecture time. And by that, I mean do not turn worship time into a time to correct bad behavior. You do that twice, you lose them. And you have to work really, really hard to get them back. Because what they're starting to think is like, well, here's another time. Pastor Michael's going to chew us out. Like, it doesn't help them. This, by the way, if you're ever preaching in front of older people, they don't care for it either. It's much better to correct those bad behaviors one-on-one or one-on-two or whatever the problem happens to be, because that builds relationship and the other drives it apart. So the three things, again, stories, super helpful. Helps retain attention, helps you keep people with you, and it can help you break down those more abstract concepts and holds them together. And again, where can you find them? Anywhere. Does the author have to be Christian? It helps, but they don't have to be. And here's my reasoning usually. It's like, well, God created them. God made them with these unique skills and talents that brought their story to life for me. And all things that are good belong to Jesus anyway. So I will claim it and use it to further his kingdom. The second, props. Just makes learning more hands-on. And again, that fits in with games, anything that brings the tactile experience in. And it could be, we're going to touch this thing, or we're going to smell something, or, those disgusting jelly beans, those are very useful. Magic tricks, whatever you want in there. You're bringing in a prop, a tactile experience to the thing, and they definitely remember it long term. And then finally, use them, because your goal is ultimately to reach them where it hurts. What are the needs that they are experiencing? And part of that comes when we are spending time with them. We get to know their interests. I'm almost always telling a story that involves an animal, because the kids in my group, they really like the animal stories, and so do I. By the by, with the story thing, one thing I want to interject really quick, and we're going over, but that's okay, is if it bores you, it's not a good story. If you don't like to tell it, if you're not excited about it, it's not a good one for you. But if it excites you, my wife has heard about elephants far more than she cares to. Because I'm excited about some of these stories, and they're cool, and I'm like, hey, do you know about this? Those things. But that, really ask them. Say, hey, we want you to pick our series. Or ask them, pick a book of the Bible, we're going to talk about that. Or just get right down to it and say, hey, ask me 2 questions about God, about faith, about what it's like to be a Christian, about church, about anything in that vein. And do it for maybe 2 weeks or so that they get their chance to think about it and write it down. And then go through with genuineness, caution, where it needs to be. And I just have to say this. This is the last thing I'm going to say, hopefully. Thank you all so much. I don't know if you hear this a lot from your pastor, but as a pastor who has a very large group of Pathfinders, I am so grateful to all of you for how you spend time working with kids. We're in an era where lots of people do not want to work with the age range you work with. And I just want to commend you all for that. So thank you very much. That's all I have. I want to just close out with prayer, and then I'm going to set you free to do whatever it is that comes next. So, Jesus, thank you so much for this good group of people. I ask that you help us to think creatively, to start building up a reservoir of things that we think can assist these young people, these beautiful young people, in their knowledge of you. And God, just bless us all. Amen.